can think of younger days when I lived for my life was everything a man could want to do. I could never see tomorrow. I was never told about the sorrow.
Now you're gonna have to work. You got to work on your fade. You have to work on your fade. Welcome back to LoveBabz, Love Talk. I'm Babz Rawls-Ivy. I'm waiting for Joan Duffy to log in so we can talk about her talk today at the Beinecke, virtual talk through the Beinecke around the Black woman who left her life savings to the Yale Divinity School so that African American men could be educated. And it's Reverend Jerry Streets is gonna have her speak at Dixwell UCC too to talk about this, to spread this story about Mary Ann Goodman. So I'm looking forward to having this conversation with Joan. I don't know where she is. We short up the time, so maybe she's trying to log in from somewhere. So hopefully she'll be able to get on and we could talk about this. I love these kinds of extraordinary stories of people who, just leave these legacies for people to benefit from. So I'm looking forward to having her come on. Yeah. So yeah, I mean, yesterday was just such a child in need. It's one of those things that just stays with you in your spirit because uh, you in those moments you just see how vulnerable our children are. You know what I mean? Like some real vulnerability there. you know uh Gosh, I'm just glad we were there. And as I was coming back from break, I'm sure that there would have been any number of people that would have been in this child's path to get her to safety. I'm sure. I like to believe that with my whole heart. That 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 she was supposed to be fine. You know what I mean? Like that we were the first stop on that trip. And if we weren't there, I dare say there would have been other opportunities for her to get to safety. That's how I'm thinking about this now. I can't dwell in what if we weren't there. I just have to move toward believing that she was meant to be uh, uh, taken care of, cared for, and that would have continued. That would have happened whether we were there or not. That's how I'm thinking about this kind of thing. You know, that's how I'm thinking about this, and that feels better to me than in the space of, gosh, what would have happened? So anyway, oh, here's Joan now. I'm glad she could make it. I can't wait to hear this story. I can't wait to hear how she knows this story. And I can't wait to hear what she's going to do with this story, and who else would be interested in this story. I'm looking forward to that. So, you know. Hey Joan, you have to unmute yourself and come in. Hi,
Hello.
how are you?
It's good. It's great to see you, Babz.
Nice to see you. How are you?
Pretty good.
Yeah?
Yeah, I'm ready for this. Are you?
Yes. Tell me the story. Tell me the story. Tell me your connection to the story.
Okay. Well, I don't want to give away the best of it, which will be on today's webinar, Mondays at Beinecke from 4 to 5 p.m. I sent you a QR code so that at the end, maybe you could show that and the viewers could snap that and go right to the webinar, go to the registration. But I started researching Mrs. Mary Ann Goodman because I had so many requests for more information about her. She was an African-American woman who lived from 1804 to 1872. She was born in Pittsfield, Massachusetts, and her family was enumerated among slaves in Pittsfield. She was indentured when she became old enough to take a job outside of her home, and when she fulfilled that obligation, the family was free and they moved to New Haven, Connecticut. So a very interesting part of the story is that they live next door or very close by a family by the name of Day. And Gad Day was a builder, and so his sons were about 10 years younger than Mary Ann when she was growing up. They may have been friends, but the families definitely knew each other and were friendly. They moved to New Haven around the same time, and throughout their lives, they had contact with each other. So there are many connections that I never anticipated, but it's an incredible story. So the two Day boys, this was a white family, they went to Yale Divinity School. We now have a room in our library that was funded by George Edward Day. He gave the money and the books to start that library. And so Mrs. Goodman really doesn't fit the mold of someone who would give a scholarship to Yale Divinity School, but she was a woman of faith. Her family belonged to the Congregational Church in Pittsfield. They when they moved to New Haven, they joined the College Street Congregational Church in New Haven, which is right where the College Street Music Hall is. And
I didn't know that. Okay.
Yeah, that was a church. It burned down in a tragic fire. But yes, that's right where it was. So there's a lot of special spots in New Haven relating to this story. Many tangents that it's little rabbit holes to go down with the people that she knew, but it is a story of real inspiration. She was a woman of faith, as I said, and at that time, Yale Divinity School and Yale University did not admit and matriculate people of color, men of color, because women, we weren't even at women yet. So she knew, though, that the time would come when it would be important for there to be educated ministers of color in the church. And some tried to study at Yale Divinity School, like James W.C. Pennington, who became the second minister and the first Black minister of the Temple Street African Ecclesiastical Society, which is now still going strong as our Dixwell Avenue Congregational Church. So she knew these people, she knew their stories. And so through many twists and turns, she thought it was important to see that men of color could get an education for the ministry. And upon her death in 1872, she her complete bequest to the Yale Divinity School amounted to $5,000, and that amounts in this day and age to over $121,000. So it was a very generous gift, and she it's said that she forgot about her own burial and didn't put aside any money for her burial, but I actually saw in her papers that she did have a plot in the new cemetery, which would not have been Grove Street where she's buried. The new cemetery at that point in time would have been the Evergreen Cemetery. And I even went poking around there and found where her father and her stepmother are buried. And so those connections also opened up other little micro stories. So she had amongst her friends people of both races, and she was much beloved. It's obvious from the letters and other papers that I found. She was much beloved by her neighbors and friends and people in her church. Her father also, George Edward Day, actually wrote obituaries for both of them, and he thought they were important enough that Pittsfield, Massachusetts ought to know how things turned out after they moved to New Haven. And he said that her maiden name was Brewster, by the way. So her father, Charles Brewster, he was described as such a wonderful gentleman, generous and kind, and many other wonderful things. And the same with Mrs. Goodman. She was married twice. Her first husband was named William Hopkins, and he passed away unexpectedly in 1847. And he's supposed to be buried in Grove Street Cemetery, and though I could not find any record in the cemetery to prove that, but he is in a list of burials for that year. And so that makes me happy that at least she's with a member of her family. She's buried in what they call the Yale section. And so she's the greatest among them, I would say. And
do you have children, Joan? Did she have children? Were there
no, she never had children, at least none that survived to the point at which I have found records of her. It may be that she married a little later in life because she was obligated to be indentured out to fulfill her obligations and as a a slave, I hate to say, but she was the one very important part of the story is the Reverend Simeon S. Jocelyn, who was the first minister of the Temple Street African Ecclesiastical Society. He and his brother Nathaniel Jocelyn, who painted the beautiful portrait of Cinque from the Amistad ship, they bought up land in parts of New Haven. So they got help from some more wealthy New Haven people like Thomas R. Trowbridge, who was in shipping, and they were able to sell the land at quite a reduced rate. And it was not only an area for African Americans, but it was to be a mixed community where people wanted to have their own businesses and have their own happy, harmonious community. The only thing they were not allowed was to consume ardent spirits, as they call them. So those neighborhoods are still around today. Trowbridge Square, Jocelyn Square, Chatham Square. They were in several parts of the town. And so this is how the Mr. and Mrs. Hopkins, and later when she remarried Bradley Goodman, they had property. They had their own businesses. Mrs. Goodman was a washerwoman, and she took in jobs from the neighborhood and elsewhere. Her first husband was a joiner, which was a job that he did fancy carpentry work. Her second husband, Bradley Goodman, was kind of a jack of all trades. When they met, he owned a grocery store, which is where Sally's Pizza parking lot is today. And he also had some business interests in New York City, and owned land there as well. So when he passed away, also prematurely in 1851, again, Mrs. Goodman came into his property, his finances, and everything. And so it was an incredible story of success in many, many ways. And people were helping each other to succeed.
And so you said they lived, where did they live? In Trowbridge Park?
They lived near Trowbridge Square. Mrs. Goodman and her husbands lived at 115 Carlisle Street, one block, and it was that address is not there anymore. So it was described in the city directory as being near Howard Avenue. And one block down from there, the Reverend Simeon Jocelyn and his family lived at the corner of Putnam and Howard Avenue. So Jocelyn lived among the people that he was helping and serving in his church. So it was a mixed neighborhood of people who cared for each other and helped create a harmonious community.
Wow. And so And so they went to the Congregational Church, which was
Mhm.
at that particular time downtown on College Street.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, it's amazing that there were a number of churches that sprung up from many of the churches in New Haven would have what they called mission churches in different parts of town, because people didn't have the transportation like today, but it seemed like all of the churches that were springing up in the mid to late 1830s were mixed race churches. So something happened where there was not that segregation. The church that Jocelyn was the first pastor of, and now Dixwell Avenue, that was founded specifically to be a church for African Americans. But the church that Mrs. Goodman went to, and her father and stepmother moved to a different part of town, and they went to the Howe Street Congregational Church.
Okay. Yeah, there's a
And
lot of congregational churches.
they were all over town. There was a Park Street Church. There was a Church Street Church. There was a Pilgrim Church. But those churches all had mixed race members. So something good, I would say, happened, that people were decided to live in harmony. They were not content to segregate people on the basis of race. And I think that this is a very positive and inspirational story that is not what we hear, certainly not what we hear and people experience today. And I have been very surprised and happily so to learn the things that I have learned. Mrs. Goodman also had a friend who wrote a letter and said, he wrote after her death to Mr. Day and said, if you find among Mrs. Goodman's possessions a picture of myself and my brothers when we were young, I would like that back, because it was the only copy. And it was hard to read the signature, but I stuck with it, and it turned out that it was A.C. Luca, L-U-C-A. So I hunted around to find the identity of Mr. Luca. It turns out that he was one of four brothers, the sons of the organist and choir director from the churches that the Brewsters and Mary Ann went to in New Haven, and they became famous performers, singers and musicians. They were known as the Luca family singers, and they would perform at abolitionist meetings. And at the time, there was a white group, a family of men and women, brothers and sisters, who were the Hutchinson family, and they did the same thing. They were performing at abolitionist meetings. and using their music to spread the word and awareness that slavery was not a good thing. It needed to end. And so the Hutchinsons invited the Lucas to travel with them. And they were such a big hit. One of the Luca boys, when they started this when they were young, very young, and he was a boy soprano. When he grew up, he turned into an amazing pianist, and of all of them, he got the most cheers whenever they performed. And later, he went to Liberia, and he used the rest of his life teaching music in the new colony that was formed for African Americans who wished to return to their homeland, though they may have been a few generations away from their homeland. But he wound up writing the Liberian national anthem, composed the music, and the lyrics were written by the president of Liberia.
Wow. Wow, this is such a New Haven connection. This is crazy.
It's amazing. Well, who knew that we had this amazingly talented singing group in the early 1800s, right up through their adulthood when they moved to Zanesville, Ohio. Some continue to perform. Unfortunately, the brother who moved to Liberia, when he did come back to the States to see his family, he had contracted a fever from Africa, and he passed away from it. So that was right around the time when Mrs. Goodman also passed away. So
Wow. So what was the most what was the most interesting thing about this? Like, how did you know to find this? Like, how did it fall into your hands to like do this looking, digging?
well, that's why they call me Joan of Archives.
I love that. I love that. Joan Archives. Love it.
Well, we Yale, of course, knew about Mrs. Goodman because she gave this scholarship, and her papers are archived with the treasurers, Yale treasurers' papers, at manuscripts and archives at Sterling Memorial Library, and the chief research archivist Judith Ann Schiff had researched her many years ago, but it was just that people wanted to know more about her than just the basic facts about the scholarship and why she was buried in Grove Street Cemetery, and why did she give all of her money and not even think of saving some to bury herself. And I would get questions all the time about that. So I knew there was a real woman behind the story. And so that the human part is what I wanted to sort of dig up, if you forgive me for using that. But I tried to not leave any stone unturned. I went to the cemeteries looking for the family members. When I went to Evergreen Cemetery to find Mr. and Mrs. Brewster, there was just grass and in the space where they were. Well, I knew there had to be something under there. So I took a stick and I moved a little bit of the soil, and sure enough, there was a stone. So I was able to uncover that a bit, and then the folks at the cemetery did a much better job of it. So now the stone is visible. And I'm making sure that all of this information will be accessible to people. I've asked to have the treasurer's office papers relating to Mrs. Goodman digitized, and those will be put into to Yale's digital library, which is in development. I'm going to add all of the graves and find a grave and make the connections from the family members. Mary Ann's own mother, named Mary, passed away in 1834 in Pittsfield. So that was something that I learned only fairly recently. I don't just because I write down the information and present it, it doesn't mean the research is over. I always keep my eye out for more gems that might come up. So she is in the Pittsfield Cemetery, and so I will make all those connections so that anyone can follow up for more information.
So today you're having your virtual talk with the binding key, through the binding key, of the binding key, from the binding key. Today at what, 4 o'clock? It's just Mondays at the binding key?
Mondays at binding key, yes, from 4 to almost 5 p.m.
Yeah. And yours is a virtual talk, so people can log in. I posted it up on our Facebook page, so it's
perfect.
There. So I've been sharing it and connecting you to it and the binding key to it, and just putting it up there so people can check it out. So that's today. Oh, and thank you, Harry, for putting it up. Mondays at the binding key. So Mary Ann
there it is.
With Joan Duffy. So Joan of the Archives. Okay, so that's today at 4 o'clock. And you can tune in and you can learn more about Mary Ann Goodman, her life, her legacy, how she left in 1872. $5,000 is now like, $100,000. And it's still a scholarship.
That's right.
Well, thank you so much, Joan, for just like sharing this wonderful, rich story for us, to us. I'm so glad I reconnect. So Joan and I went to Church of the Redeemer together. So she is my church sister and forever will always be my church sister. So I was just so happy to, first of all, to see her, and secondly, to hear about this story. So I was so glad that you could come on this morning to share a little bit. So if anybody wants to know more about this wonderful story, today at 4 o'clock, she'll be on talking about this. Just log in and register and do all the stuff you have to do virtually. And then and she'll walk you through this wonderful story, because I know there's way more richness to this story than what she shared this morning with us. Thank you, Joan. It's so good to see you.
You too, Babz.
So feel free to contact me anytime you find more gems.
Okay, sounds wonderful. Thank you so much for this opportunity. It has been an honor, and I hope to see you again soon.
Yes, Joan of the Archives, you shall see soon. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
All right, I'll be back tomorrow, y'all. Have a nice day, and go check out Joan of the Archives at Binding Key today at 4 o'clock virtually. Hear more about Mary Ann Goodman. Thank you, Harry Rose.
Hi, this is Babz Rawls-Ivy from New Haven, Connecticut, and you're listening to WNHHLP 103.5 FM, streaming live at newhavenindependent.org.
Is all right with me, 'cause you make me feel so brand new. spend my life with you. Let me say scenes, baby, since we've been together. Ooh, loving you forever is what I